Tyrion Lannister had never been one to shrink from the truth. Indeed, he wore truth on his sleeve the way other men wore pride, a shield and a weapon in one. The truth in King's Landing, however, could be more perilous than 1,000 swords, and only a fool would wield it carelessly. On the morning he decided to reveal Joffrey's parentage, before Ned Stark had even set foot on the steps of the Great September of Baelor in chains. Tyrion knew he was no fool, but he also knew the realm would call him worse. He was a dwarf, an imp, a demon monkey to some, and yet it was his cunning tongue that had always saved him where brawn could not. Still, he could not predict how this day would unfold. He paced in his small chambers in the Red Keep, the swirl of wine in his cup all but forgotten as he contemplated whether this gamble would cost him his head. He had returned from the Vale only days earlier, escaping Lisa Arryn's clutches by trial by combat. Bronze Sword had done the talking then. Tyrion's cunning, as always, had arranged the circumstances. But upon his arrival in King's Landing, he discovered chaos swirling like a maelstrom. The court buzzed with suspicion about Jon Arryn's death, about the lineage of the royal children, about the new hand of the king, Ned Stark, who seemed a wolf in a city of lions. Eddard Stark had been prying into the matter of Robert Baratheon's heirs. Tyrion had learned, though no one quite knew how far he had gotten. But Ned Stark's hush-hush investigation wasn't hush enough. Not in a city where whispers took wing in every shadow. Tyrion suspected Stark was close to discovering what Tyrion himself had deduced years ago, and what Jon Arryn had uncovered just before his death. The boy on the throne was no Baratheon. He was a Lannister in truth and name, though only behind hidden doors. Yet Tyrion saw the storm on the horizon. If Ned Stark revealed this truth, half the realm would be undone. If Cersei discovered that Ned was about to tell Robert, war would be inevitable. Tywin Lannister would descend on the capital. The Starks would rally the north. The Baratheons of Storm's End might go one way or another, depending on Robert's mood, or else Stannis would come sweeping in with proofs of his own. In any case, it would be the entire realm that would suffer the resulting conflagration. To expose Joffrey's bastardy was dangerous for the House of Lannister as well, but Tyrion had a mind to control that truth rather than let Ned Stark present it in such a way that the Lannisters would be painted as devils. He weighed his options with care, replaying each scenario in his head. If he kept silent, Cersei or Jaime might strike first against Ned. Then the city would be drenched in blood. If Tyrion went to Robert and laid bare the secrets, he might direct the storm himself and mitigate the damage. His father's wrath would be terrible, but Tywin Lannister was far away at Casterly Rock, dealing with other matters. Tyrion had always been the least cherished child, the freakish son who had killed his mother in childbirth. This was not lost on him. Tywin might even call for Tyrion's head should the truth prove too costly for House Lannister. But Tyrion recognized that if the truth was to come out anyway, and he believed it would, then better it come in a manner that left him some measure of control over what happened next. He did not spend all his time brooding alone. As always, he had his ears open. He had a certain rapport with Varys, who thrived on secrets. They were the very heart of the eunuch's power. Varys had been dropping hints of tension for weeks, cautioning Tyrion that the hand looks to uncover the truth, my lord, and the queen grows quite anxious in these uncertain times. Peter Baelish, Littlefinger, similarly wore a sly smile whenever Bastardy or Baratheon lineage was mentioned, as though he stood to profit from the entire ordeal. Tyrion had tried to glean from them the exact state of play, but even Varys and Littlefinger did not fully know Ned Stark's next move. Varys suspected the Honorable Lord of Winterfell intended to approach Robert with proof once he had it in hand. But no one knew how soon that might be. Tyrion's plan was simple, at least in his mind. He would approach Robert that very day, laying out the evidence of Joffrey's parentage in a way that made it seem he was doing the king a service. He would emphasize that, while the boy was not Robert's by blood, there was still a chance to handle the matter with discretion. If Cersei was confronted too late, she might murder Robert before he could rally the support of the realm. Tyrion could spin the truth as a dire threat to the king's very life, making himself appear as a loyal informant. It was dangerous. If Robert lost his temper if he lashed out, and Robert Baratheon was well known for lashing out, Tyrion could pay for it with his neck. but dwarves were used to living dangerously in a world that scorned them. Tyrion hoped the king's affection for wine and old camaraderie might stay his hand long enough for reason to prevail. The first challenge was to gain the king's audience. Robert, by all accounts, was not a man who received counsel well in the early hours. He preferred to break his fast with ale and roast boar, perhaps a whore or two from the Street of Silk if the queen was absent, and then waste his day at the lists or in the practice yard. But Tyrion had a notion that Robert might be found in his solar that morning, meeting with Ned Stark about the upcoming tournament and the troubles in the realm. Determined, Tyrion left his cramped quarters and made for the king's apartments. The day was sweltering for early spring, the red stone corridors gathering heat. Gold cloaks stood watch, each man's face beaded with sweat, but they let Tyrion pass unmolested. The imp was accustomed to the smirks, the half-hidden sneers, the unsubtle remarks about his stunted legs. Let them mock. He had far more pressing matters to attend. Outside the king's solar, the murmurs of heated conversation were audible. Tyrion recognized two voices: Robert's loud bellow, full of frustration, and Ned Stark's lower, calmer baritone. He could not distinguish the words, but he suspected they were quarreling over some matter of state. Possibly the gold in the treasury. Littlefinger had said that the crown was in debt, and Robert wanted to host an extravagant tournament. Ned Stark, the staid northerner, doubtless disapproved. Tyrion rapped sharply on the door with his knuckles. Ser Meryn Trant opened it a crack, peering out suspiciously. The King's Guard was no friend of Tyrion's. None of them were. Ser Meryn had once confessed to Jaime, in Tyrion's hearing, that he found the imp unsettling. Tyrion was not surprised. His entire life had unsettled the proud and the pompous, if only by existing. "I wish to speak with the king," Tyrion said plainly. "It's urgent." Meryn's face wrinkled. "He's with Lord Stark." "Tell his grace," Tyrion said with a certain finality. "I'll wait." Meryn glanced over his shoulder, uncertain. But the voices inside had fallen silent, doubtless alerted by Tyrion's knock. Meryn withdrew, and soon Robert's booming voice called, "Let him in." Tyrion entered to find Robert leaning over a stout wooden table covered in maps, rosters, and ledgers. Lord Eddard Stark stood across from him, a furrow in his brow. Ned's gray eyes flicked to Tyrion with only mild surprise. He had not expected the imp, it seemed. "Piss on all these numbers, Stark." Robert was in the middle of saying, "I need men, not scribbles in a ledger. We'll find a way to pay for the tournament. Gods know I could use some damned entertainment in this city." Then he noticed Tyrion and paused, standing up straight. Robert was a large man gone to fat, but still powerful in presence. His hair was mostly black but shot with gray. The red flush in his cheeks told Tyrion that the king was in no jolly mood. "Imp," Robert said. "What's so urgent it can't wait?" Tyrion approached with careful steps, ignoring Ned's watchful stare. "Your Grace, might I have a private word?" Ned Stark pressed his lips in a thin line. "If this concerns the crown." "Lord Stark," Tyrion said, measuring his tone with the practiced diplomacy he'd learned in courts all his life. "I fear this concerns the king's personal interests." He shot a meaningful look at Robert, who frowned but gestured for Ned to remain. "Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Lord Stark," Robert declared. "He's my hand, isn't he? The right hand of the king hears what the king hears, or what good is he?" Tyrion inclined his head. This was not ideal, but he could work with it. Perhaps it was better, in some ways, for Ned to hear it from his own mouth rather than discover it alone. "Very well, Your Grace. I have come across certain troubling rumors in the city. Rumors about the parentage of Prince Joffrey." He let the last phrase hang in the air, watching Robert's face. Robert's heavy brow lowered. "What in all the hells are you talking about?" His tone was sharp, as if he were a moment away from losing his temper. Tyrion braced himself. "The rumor goes that the prince might not be a Baratheon at all, but rather—" He paused, carefully letting out a breath. "Rather a Lannister. That is to say, fathered by Ser Jaime Lannister, Not by you, your grace. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Ned Stark stiffened visibly, his gaze snapping to Tyrion. The tension in the room could have been cut with a knife. Robert's eyes bulged, and the veins in his neck corded as if ready to burst. "I'll have your tongue for that," Robert growled, stepping around the table. Spittle flew from his mouth as he advanced on Tyrion. "You dare come in here and say that my son, my heir, is not mine?" He grabbed Tyrion by the collar of his tunic, lifting him nearly off his feet. Tyrion's breath caught. It seemed he might die right here, right now, at the hands of the king, strangled or battered to death. "Your grace," he croaked. "It is not my intention to insult you, but you must know the realm is full of these whispers. Jon Arryn was investigating. Lord Stark." He managed to direct his gaze toward Ned, who had come around the table in alarm. "My lord, you have looked into the matter. You must have found evidence. I beg you both, calm yourselves, and I will speak what I know." Ned Stark put a restraining hand on Robert's shoulder. "Your grace, wait. Let him speak. He may be telling the truth or he may be lying, but we should hear him out." Stark's tone was urgent. He did not want Robert to do something rash in the heat of anger. Robert's grip loosened enough for Tyrion to breathe. The dwarf touched the side of his neck gingerly, trying not to appear too weak. "I have no love for the notion that my nephew, my sister's son, is a product of incest," Tyrion said once he found his voice again. "But the evidence is compelling. You have only to look at him, my lord. The Baratheons are a lineage known for their black hair, even in far-flung bastards. Your father had it, Stannis has it, even your bastard children scattered across the realm have that same trait. But Joffrey is golden of hair. As golden as my siblings." Ned Stark's expression was stony, but Tyrion saw a glimmer of acknowledgement there. He had indeed been following the same trail. "Your grace," Ned said quietly, "Jon Arryn died in pursuit of this secret. He visited brothels, seeking out your bastards to confirm they carried the traits of House Baratheon. He found the truth in a book of lineages. The seed is strong." Robert's face contorted with horror and fury. His cheeks shook. "You!" He released Tyrion abruptly, spinning away as if he couldn't bear to look at either man. "My wife, my queen, by the gods. She's lain with Jaime?" A pounding quiet suffused the room. Tyrion wondered if Robert might simply snap and kill them all. He had every right to rage. To be told your heir is not truly yours, that your wife has betrayed you with her own brother, was an insult that few men could endure. But Robert was no ordinary man. He was the king, and a volatile one at that. Tyrion dared not speak again until Robert turned back. Robert's voice shook, low and dangerous. "If this is true, if there's even a chance this is true, Cersei's womb is a pit of treason. And that boy, that whelp, that golden-haired whelp is no son of mine." He looked to Ned with a tortured expression. "Gods be good, Ned. Is this why Jon Arryn was killed?" "It may be," Ned admitted. "Cersei, if she feared Lord Arryn's knowledge, she may have arranged it or had Jaime do it, or another. But it seems likely she wanted to protect this secret." Ned paused. "We must act, your grace." Tyrion cleared his throat, trying to remain useful. "If you mean to move against the queen, time is of the essence. My sister is cunning, and Jaime is close by with the Kingsguard. The moment she suspects you've learned the truth, she may take steps." "Steps?" Robert repeated softly, his face twisting. "She might kill me in my sleep, or have me gored by that damned boar she keeps urging me to hunt." He pounded a fist against his table, rattling the ledgers. "I will not stand for this." Then he caught sight of Tyrion, remembering who was in the room. "And you, imp, why do you bring this to me? Do you want to see your own sister's head on a spike? Or is this some scheme of Tywin's?" "Believe me, your grace," said Tyrion, carefully measuring his words. "My father does not know of my actions, nor does my sister. My loyalty is to House Lannister, yes, but I also have loyalty to the crown and, to a degree, to the realm. This scandal will break whether I tell you or not. If it breaks in my family's control, Ned Stark loses his head. War breaks out. My father marches on the city. Thousands die. The kingdom is torn apart. Perhaps you die. Perhaps my sister dies. I would prefer a resolution that does not end with heads on spikes. If you must lay blame, blame me. But I warn you, the time for secrets has passed. Ned Stark listened intently, no doubt sifting through Tyrion's logic for deceit. Robert stared at Tyrion, fists still clenched. The king's breathing was ragged. "Damn you," he finally said. "Damn you to the deepest of the 7 hells. You speak reason, but I don't trust you." Tyrion inclined his head. "I would not trust me either in your place, but you will see that I act from self-preservation as much as anything else. My sister's folly endangers us all. Let us not forget, if the realm learns Joffrey is not Robert's seed, Cersei will not simply roll over. She will fight to protect her children. A mother's love is a fierce thing." Robert eyed Ned. "Send for the gold cloaks. We must secure the Red Keep. Then we'll bring the Queen in for questioning, her and Jaime both." But then the king's caution reared its head, or perhaps Ned Stark's cooler mind influenced him. "No, first I must consider how to do this. She has spies everywhere, Ned. One sign that we know, and she might flee or strike." Ned dipped his head. "We should keep this circle small, Your Grace. Lord Renly might be of help, or Ser Barristan. Men who are loyal to you first and foremost. But we must be swift." Tyrion held his tongue. He dared not push too hard. This was a matter for Robert and Ned to handle, though he was keenly aware that if Cersei discovered his role in this, she would never rest until he was in a grave. He was likely a dead man either way, but at least now he had Robert's ear and Ned's cautious acceptance. Perhaps, in time, he could negotiate a position for himself, as the Lannister who had saved the king from a grave betrayal. It was a thin hope, but Tyrion had thrived on thin hopes all his life. Robert ruminated, slamming his palm against the table from time to time as he paced, cursing the gods, cursing Cersei, cursing himself for not seeing it sooner. Finally, he said, "We'll do this quietly. Ned, you'll summon Renly. I'll want Barristan as well. The rest of them, Pycelle, Littlefinger, Varys, I don't trust them. Not yet. Gods. This city is a pit of liars and backstabbers." He turned back to Tyrion with a scowl. "As for you, imp, keep your mouth shut until I summon you again. If you breathe so much as a word of this to anyone, I'll hang you from the battlements myself." Tyrion bowed with mocking grace. "My lips are sealed, Your Grace." He shot Ned Stark a level glance, acknowledging their silent alliance, however temporary, and took his leave. Outside the solar, Tyrion felt the pounding of his heart in his chest. He had done it. The truth was out, at least to the king, and now all the pieces on the board would shift. Ned Stark, ironically, was not forced to choose between his honor and cunning. Robert had heard the tale from a Lannister mouth, not from the hand. Perhaps that shielded Ned from the immediate repercussions, or perhaps not. There was still the question of how the Queen would react. And Tyrion suspected that if Cersei discovered his hand in this, she would be more than vengeful. She would be murderous. But he had never held much affection for his sister anyway, and the feeling was surely mutual. Tyrion made his way back to his chambers, passing a group of courtiers who barely spared him a glance. Already he imagined half the people in the Red Keep were whispering about some new scandal, though they might not know the details. Cersei's watchers would note Tyrion's visit to the king, no doubt, and that might rouse her suspicions. He needed to be cautious. He considered for a moment going to the brothel district to hide himself away, but that was a coward's move, and he knew it. Better to remain in the castle, close to the seat of power. One never knew when an opportunity might present itself. He thought of sending word to Shae, a woman he had grown quite fond of, but realized that was too dangerous. He had not yet established her inside the city. He shook his head, trying to focus. Survival first, pleasure later. A swirl of anxious thoughts made it impossible for him to rest, so he strolled the halls, affecting an air of casual indifference. To any onlooker, the imp was merely wandering, bored and possibly half drunk. That was the image he cultivated. A few hours later, Bells rang in the courtyard, summoning men to muster for some reason. Tyrion watched from a balcony as a squad of gold cloaks marched in formation, led by Lord Commander Janos Slynt. The day was too warm for so much steel and plate, but the men seemed determined. Tyrion wondered if Robert had tasked them with quietly tightening security around the Red Keep, or perhaps Ned Stark had mobilized them. In any case, the city was stirring, the tension in the air rising to a fever pitch. Tyrion's part was done for now. He had passed the burden on to bigger men, men who would decide the future of the realm in the next few hours or days at most. Far away in her own suite of rooms, Queen Cersei Lannister was not idle. She stood before a tall mirror of polished metal, the tapestry behind her bearing the golden lions of House Lannister. Her green eyes flicked over her reflection, but her mind was miles away. She had just received word through one of her ladies-in-waiting that Tyrion had been seen exiting the king's private solar, looking purposeful. She knew her brother well enough to guess he was meddling in something. The question was, what, and why had the king summoned him? Jaime was out in the yard, sparring with men half his skill, to keep up appearances as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Cersei was alone, save for a pair of attendants. She dismissed them with an imperious wave of her hand, her lips pressed thin. She could not banish the unease that gnawed at her belly. The secret she guarded was the heart of everything, the reason for her child's ascension. If Robert had even a whiff of the truth, she had to know if it was so. She summoned one of her trusted spies, a matronly woman named Rella, who had served Cersei for years. Rella had ears in the servants' quarters, in the kitchens, among the laundresses. If there was gossip, she would hear it, and she had heard plenty. The name Jon Arryn, the rumor that the Hand had discovered something, that Ned Stark was following in Jon Arryn's footsteps. Now Tyrion's sudden audience with Robert. These pieces added up to a dire possibility. Cersei felt a wave of fury. She had always hated her dwarf brother, but she had never imagined he would be so bold as to reveal the family's darkest secret. Yet if he did, it could only be because he planned to manipulate the king somehow. She intended to find out what advantage Tyrion sought. He was no fool, that one, no matter how he looked. If he was behind this, it meant cunning, calculation, and a certain willingness to betray his own blood. Cersei's heart hammered with fear and hatred. Her first instinct was to run to Jaime, to plan a preemptive strike on Ned Stark or on Robert himself, but she curbed that impulse. The corridors were likely watched. Such a move would confirm their guilt. Instead, she decided to bide her time, if only for an hour or two, while she gathered more information. She needed to know how Robert had reacted to Tyrion's revelation. It might be that Robert dismissed it as nonsense, or that Tyrion had couched it in half-truths, or that Ned Stark was still in the dark. Too many unknowns. Cersei's face felt stiff with tension as she forced a smile, instructing Rella to linger in the halls near the king's solar and pick up any word of what transpired. Elsewhere in the castle, Eddard Stark hurried along corridors with a grim look. He had just left the king in Renly's company, the younger Baratheon brother. Renly, upon hearing the allegations, had been shocked but not disbelieving. He had long suspected his sister-in-law's children might not be Robert's. He'd even approached Ned about a plan to move swiftly against the Lannisters, though that conversation had borne little fruit in the original timeline. Now, with Robert's knowledge, the path was set. Ned had to quickly secure a loyal force. The precarious moment had arrived. Ned was determined to handle it with honor, even if that meant arresting the Queen. He did not relish the thought. She was the mother of Robert's children, or the children Robert believed were his, but that illusion was shattered. Her children were not the rightful heirs. If Ned's sense of justice prevailed, they would be stripped of their claims, perhaps placed under guard. He thought of Sansa, who was betrothed to Joffrey. How would this change that arrangement? The betrothal was likely void, though that was a minor concern next to the upheaval in the realm. He found himself crossing the courtyard where the gold cloaks had mustered. Janos Slynt was there, receiving orders from a messenger in the livery of House Stark. Ned watched carefully. It seemed Robert had decided to put the city watch under Ned's partial command. That was wise. Slynt was not a man Ned particularly liked, but at least with the hand's oversight, the watch might remain loyal to the king. For the moment, anyway. The day was turning stifling, the sun high, horses snorted, men clamored. The entire city felt on edge. When Ned entered the tower that housed his own quarters, he found his daughters waiting anxiously. Arya was leaning against a column, arms folded, while Sansa stood beside her with folded hands, looking worried. Ned forced a smile. "My girls," he said, ruffling Arya's hair. "Is something wrong?" Arya's expression was stormy. "Everything is wrong here. Sansa is crying all the time. The place stinks. I hate it." She glowered, but Ned could see the fear beneath her anger. Sansa's eyes were red. "Father, Joffrey hasn't come to see me in days. And Mother wrote that Bran woke. But," she glanced at Arya, "we both just want to go home." Ned sighed. How he wished he could send them back to Winterfell. The city was about to become a battlefield of schemes. But to dispatch his daughters away now might raise suspicions, might tip off the queen. And if Cersei got wind of him sending the Stark girls away, she could guess that he'd discovered her secret. "Soon," Ned said gently. "I promise you both. We will leave this place soon." Arya gave him a suspicious look. "You're planning something." Ned's heart clenched with parental protectiveness. "That's enough, Arya. Let us speak of it later. For now, I need you to stay in your chambers or the small courtyard. I don't want you wandering off. Both of you." Grumbling, Arya complied. Ned left them with Septa Mordane's watchful eye, praying the Septa would keep them safe. He had more pressing tasks. Summoning his guard, he prepared to meet Renly and Barristan Selmy in the Tower of the Hand, where they would lay final plans to confront the Queen. He also sent a discreet note to Littlefinger, requesting his presence. Ned did not trust Peter Baelish entirely, but the man controlled the purse strings and might be able to bribe a portion of the city watch if needed. Varys, he decided, he would not invite. Too many secrets ran through that one's hands. Yet even as he penned the missive, he wondered, was it wise to rely on Baelish? The man was slippery, but with a secret of this magnitude, Ned needed all the help he could muster. King Robert, meanwhile, drank heavily in his solar, his brother Renly watching with concern. The king's face was pale and drawn, like a man who had just received news of a dear friend's death. In a sense, he had. His illusions about his marriage, his children, lay in ruins. He drank cup after cup of strong wine until Renly feared the man would pass out. But Robert did not relent. "I loved her once, you know," he muttered. "Not Cersei. Gods no. Lyanna. I've thought of her every day since she was taken from me. But they gave me that golden-haired bitch, and I tried to do my duty, but she was always cold. A pair of ice-green eyes in a golden body. That's all she was. I drank, she whored with her brother. The gods are cruel, Renly." Renly laid a hand on Robert's shoulder. "Brother, you must be strong. The realm depends on you. You must act. Arrest her. End this charade." A savage growl escaped Robert's throat. "And do what with the boy? Joffrey, he's not mine. Do I kill him? By the gods, he's no son of mine. But is he guilty of his mother's sin?" Renly inhaled deeply. "A child cannot choose his parentage, but if you leave him alive and declare him bastard-born, he might grow into a threat. The Lannisters will rally around him or use him as a figurehead to oppose you. It is harsh, but we must consider the stability of the throne." Robert downed another cup, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Gods be good. To kill a boy." His voice trailed off. "He always seemed like a spiteful little thing. Reminds me of that damned cat I once tried to pet as a lad. Scratched me. Joffrey was never a sweet child. But does he deserve to die for my wife's treachery? I cannot stomach it, Renly." Renly exhaled. "Then keep him prisoner. Exile him. I don't know. But Cersei will not go quietly. If she thinks you'll harm her children, she might do anything." Robert slammed the cup down. "Then let her try. I am the king. I'll put her head on a spike if she dares." But even as he spat those words, A faint tremor in his voice revealed the turmoil inside. And so it was that the realm teetered on the edge of a knife. Tyrion waited, pacing in his quarters, wondering if at any moment the door might fly open and the Kingsguard drag him to the dungeons. Cersei paced likewise in her rooms, trying to gather scraps of information that never quite painted the full picture. Ned Stark prepared for a confrontation he dreaded. Robert Baratheon wrestled with his pride and his rage. Renly planned and schemed, though not as cunningly as some. Jaime, for his part, sensed a storm in the air but did not yet grasp its full magnitude. And in the shadows, men like Littlefinger and Varys weighed the advantage, ready to pick apart the spoils of any chaos to come. By midday, the Red Keep had turned into a hornet's nest of activity. Servants rushed about, carrying messages and supplies. The City Watch posted extra guards at strategic points, though the official word was that the king feared bandits or smugglers. Outside the castle walls, the city itself remained largely unaware of the impending crisis. The chatter in the markets was of taxes, of the upcoming tournament, of the next shipment of goods from Dorne. They had no idea that the entire kingdom's succession would soon be thrown into question. Late that afternoon, Ned Stark, Renly, Barristan Selmy, and several loyal knights waited in the throne room, having decided upon a plan. Robert Baratheon would summon Cersei under the pretext of discussing the upcoming tournament. Jaime would be diverted, called away to inspect some matter with the Kingsguard. Once the Queen was alone with the king, the guards loyal to Ned and Robert would appear and escort her to a secure chamber, where she would be confronted with the accusations. If she resisted or threatened Robert's life, they were under orders to restrain her. The entire plan hinged on secrecy and timing. Tyrion lingered in the gallery above, not officially invited but having found a discreet way to watch events unfold. He suspected this confrontation would be a turning point for the realm. Part of him felt a twinge of guilt at betraying his sister's secret, but he reminded himself she had never truly been a sister to him, not in her heart. And in any case, better that he be the one to bring the truth forth than Ned Stark. He might salvage something of his own position this way, or so he told himself. A hush fell over the throne room as Robert Baratheon entered through the great doors, clad in the regalia of kingship. A heavy cloak trimmed with ermine, a golden crown upon his head, and an expression of grim determination. Ned, standing near the Iron Throne, felt a pang of sympathy at the sight of his old friend. Robert had once been a laughing giant of a man, so full of life. Now he looked as though the weight of the 7 kingdoms lay upon him, crushing him. Cersei arrived moments later, gliding into the hall with regal poise. She wore a dress of emerald velvet, embroidered with golden lions, her hair coiled in an elaborate arrangement that set off her striking features. At her flank were 2 Lannister guardsmen, though not the Kingsguard. She paused upon seeing the array of armed men near the throne, her green eyes flicking over Barristan Selmy and the contingent of City Watch. Her brow arched slightly, but she maintained composure. "You sent for me, husband?" she asked, her tone a careful mask of politeness. Robert gestured for her to come forward. The Lannister guardsmen looked uneasy, but Cersei held up a hand, signaling them to remain behind. She approached. Ned watched, heart-thudding. They had no illusions about how dangerous Cersei could be, but it was crucial to appear calm. "Wife," Robert said, his voice echoing in the hall, "I've discovered a grave matter concerning our son Joffrey." Cersei's lips tightened. "Oh? And what matter is that?" Ned felt as if every eye in the realm was on this moment. Robert took a heavy breath. "He is not mine. He is your son by Jaime Lannister, your brother. Jon Arryn died learning this, and now I have learned it too. The game is done, Cersei." A cold hush settled. The Lannister guardsmen stiffened, one shifting his hand to his sword hilt. Barristan Selmy stepped forward in warning, and so did half a dozen gold cloaks. Tension crackled in the air like lightning. Cersei regarded Robert with a mixture of contempt and caution. "You speak madness. Don't lie," Robert roared, startling everyone with the sheer force of his voice. "Look at him, golden-haired, when all my bastards have black hair, as did my father. Jon Arryn found proof in old records. Ned Stark corroborated it. And now, he trailed off, face reddening. And now your brother dwarfs me as a father. He spat the words bitterly. Cersei's chin lifted. You would take the word of Ned Stark and that twisted imp? They've conspired against me, against House Lannister. It's all lies. Robert shook his head, as if trying to quell his own rage. I've seen enough to believe it. Answer me truthfully, or I shall have you dragged to a cell until you do. Is Joffrey Jaime's son? Now Cersei's mask cracked. A flicker of desperation crossed her face, followed by a kind of fierce resignation. What if he is? She said quietly, almost too quiet to hear. What if all my children are Jaime's? They are more worthy to rule than any of your whoresons. Her tone dripped venom. You were never a husband to me. You always mourned your precious Lyanna. You left me cold, alone, while you filled the realm with bastards. Ned watched Robert's fists clench. He worried that Robert might strike her down on the spot. But the king only growled. You have committed treason of the worst sort. You've made me a cuckold before the entire realm. Cersei's eyes flashed. I gave you heirs. No one need ever have questioned their blood. You were too drunk and too busy with your tavern sluts to notice. The realm will accept them as your children, as they always have. But now you let these fools fill your head with doubts. You make it impossible for me to protect our family. She glanced meaningfully at the Lannister guards, as if to summon them. Barristan Selmy spoke then, his voice resonant with the authority of the Kingsguard. Your Grace, we must ask you to come with us. You will be treated fairly, but the king demands an account of your actions. The Queen's guards hesitated, glancing between Robert's men and their mistress. There was no clear command to fight, yet they saw their queen threatened. Cersei, however, did not order them to attack. She was not so rash as to start a bloodbath in the throne room when they were outnumbered. You fool, she said to Robert. Do you think I will go quietly? I am a Lannister. We do not go meekly to the headsman's block. She looked at Ned Stark. And you, Lord Stark, do you truly believe Robert's cause is just? You saw what a monstrous child he fathered on some whore. All of the Baratheon bastards are savage, like the father. Ned, stoic, simply said, My lady, the king has called for you to answer for your crimes. You would be wise to comply. Robert, chest heaving, stepped down from the raised dais and took a position less than an arm's length from Cersei. The guards watched like hawks, weapons at the ready. You are done, woman, he said thickly. We will settle your fate soon enough. For now, you will be taken to your chambers under guard. Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen will be placed under my protection. Surrender your men, or they will all die tonight. There it was, the ultimatum. For a moment, Cersei looked trapped, like a lioness in a snare. Then her gaze hardened. Fine, she said at last. But do not think you have one, Robert. A silent signal passed, and Barristan Selmy motioned for 2 knights and a pair of gold cloaks to escort the queen away. Her Lannister guards parted nervously, standing aside as she was taken in a measured march from the throne room. Cersei walked with her head high, emerald skirts trailing, refusing to show weakness. The moment she left, the tension in the hall seemed to collapse. Robert sank onto the iron throne, which loomed over him like a vulture. Ned noted how ill at ease the king looked in that monstrous seat. See her locked in the Tower of the Hand for now, Robert said, or one of the lesser towers. I don't want her near my chambers. He ran a hand across his face. Gods, this is a dark day. Where is Jaime? Someone find him. Ned hesitated. If Jaime learned what had happened, he might try to free Cersei by force, or even kill Robert. I'll see to it, Your Grace. So the men scattered to carry out their orders. Tyrion watched from above, noting that the confrontation had ended without immediate bloodshed. That was something. But what came next? A queen accused of treason would not sit idle. Jaime, once he heard, would not stand aside. Tywin Lannister, upon learning that his daughter was imprisoned and his grandchildren declared bastards, would march. The realm might still go up in flames, Yet Tyrion could not help but feel a grim satisfaction that he had at least steered events to a more controlled revelation, rather than the chaos that would have unfolded if Cersei had tried to kill Ned Stark to keep the secret hidden. Still, the day was not over. In the corridors, men hustled, swords drawn, searching for Jaime Lannister. Servants fled in terror, uncertain what was happening. The word spread quickly. The Queen was arrested. The Queen was a traitor. A hush of astonishment enveloped the Red Keep, and soon enough the city would know. Jaime was found in the practice yard, wiping sweat from his brow after defeating a younger knight in a sparring match. When the gold cloaks approached, he turned with a half-smile. "Come to congratulate me?" he teased. "I was just finishing." But he saw the steel in their eyes, the tension in their stance. His smile faded. "What is this?" The captain of the guard bowed stiffly. "Sir Jaime, we have orders from the king to escort you to him. The Queen has been accused of treason, and you are—" Jaime's eyes narrowed. "You dare speak to me of treason? I am Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Where is the king?" The guard swallowed, not eager to draw swords with the Kingslayer. "In the throne room, sir. But he told us to bring me in chains?" Jaime sneered. He laid his hand on his sword hilt. The Lannister men-at-arms near him bristled. Tension escalated. One of Jaime's fellow Kingsguard, Ser Meryn Trant, stepped forward, trying to defuse the situation. "Sir Jaime, the Queen is seized. The king gave no order for violence, but he wishes an accounting from you." Jaime's face registered surprise. Cersei seized? So Tyrion or Ned Stark must have made a move. He had not been told. Rage flared in him. "I will speak with the king, but I will not be dragged before him like a common criminal." The guards hesitated, uncertain whether to fight or allow him to come willingly. Jaime made the choice for them. "Stand aside," he ordered. "I go where I please." He strode off, golden armor glinting, forcing them to fall in behind him. The Lannister men-at-arms trailed uncertainly. They could not simply abandon him, but neither could they start a fight with the city watch. The two groups walked at a stiff pace through the corridors, each man's sword hand itching. Yet no violence broke out before they reached the doors of the throne room. Inside, Robert sat slumped on the Iron Throne with Ned Stark at his side. Renly stood nearby, arms folded, frowning. Barristan Selmy hovered like a watchful hawk, his white cloak stirring in the slight breeze that crept in from the windows. As Jaime approached, Robert raised his head, revealing eyes bloodshot from wine and anger. "So the Kingslayer comes?" Robert said in a harsh voice. "We have questions for you. Your sister has confessed. Confessed that Joffrey is not my son." Jaime's jaw tightened, but a mocking grin curled his lip. "Confessed, has she? My sweet sister always was headstrong. So that's it, then. You think you can arrest the both of us, humiliate House Lannister, and suffer no repercussions? Is that it, your grace?" Robert stood, his fists clenched. "You bedded my wife. You fathered bastards upon the Queen. Do you deny it?" Jaime's face flickered. He glanced at Ned Stark with cold fury. Then he shrugged. "Deny it? I see no point in lies. If my sister has told you, then the secret is out. If that's treason, then get on with your formalities." There was a reckless gleam in his eye, as if he cared little for the consequences. Robert nearly shook with anger, but he forced out, "You are hereby relieved of your duties as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, and placed under arrest pending trial for treason. Ser Barristan, disarm him." Jaime's hand tightened on his sword, and for a moment Ned feared he would draw steel right here. The Lannister men behind him tensed, but Jaime flicked his gaze around the room, counting the swords. Even for a man of Jaime's skill, it was hopeless. Barristan Selmy stepped forward, sorrow in his eyes, for he had fought alongside Jaime many times. "Sir Jaime, do not make this worse." In a swift, practiced motion, Jaime drew his sword and flipped it hilt first toward Barristan, who took it. The tension eased a fraction. Jaime's men made no move to resist. Jaime shot Robert a look of disdain. "Fine, throw me in your black cells if you must, But do you think my father will let this stand? Do you think Tywin Lannister will kneel to you after this insult? A flicker of uncertainty passed across Robert's face. Let him do what he will. I am the king. He gestured to the guards. Take him. So they did. Jaime was led away, unbound but under heavy guard, his face set in a mask of defiance. As they took him through the doors, Tyrion finally saw him pass from the balcony above. Jaime did not glance up, but Tyrion felt a pang of concern. For all their differences, Jaime was the only sibling who had treated Tyrion with a modicum of kindness in his life. Tyrion wondered if Jaime even suspected his role in this revelation. If he did, Tyrion would have another enemy within his own blood. And Tywin, what of Tywin? The old lion would not be pleased. The hour that followed was a whirlwind of orders and planning. Robert declared that the children, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen, were to be confined to their quarters under guard, for their own protection. Ned wondered if Robert might truly harm them, but the king seemed hesitant to punish the children for their mother's sins. At the same time, the question of succession loomed. If none of Cersei's children were Robert's, then who would be named heir? Stannis was his elder brother, next in line after Robert, though Robert had little love for that stiff, humorless man. Renly, younger though he was closer to Robert's heart. Perhaps Robert might try to pass the crown to Renly instead. The possibilities for conflict were endless. By evening, the Red Keep had been more or less secured. Jaime and Cersei were under lock and key in separate towers. The Queen's retinue of Lannister guards was disarmed, their loyalty suspect. Tyrion, meanwhile, found himself summoned once again to the king's presence, though this time in the privacy of Robert's Solar with Ned Stark in attendance. Tyrion went warily, uncertain if the king would reward or punish him. They met amid the remnants of a meal. Roast boar bones lay scattered on a platter, and the smell of strong wine permeated the air. Robert was half in his cups, Ned more sober but equally grim. The moment Tyrion entered, Robert fixed him with a bleary glare. "Imp, so you're the one who told me of this treason." "I am," Tyrion said, inclining his head. "I trust you've taken steps to ensure the safety of the realm?" Robert let out a humorless laugh. "You might say that." He eyed Tyrion in a way that made the dwarf's spine prickle. "I should kill you for it, you know, or name you a traitor to your own house. But Ned here claims you might be of use." Ned folded his arms. "Lord Tyrion has proven, at least, that he's willing to put the truth before blind family loyalty. And he is cunning. If we are to face Lord Tywin's wrath, it might help to have the imp advising us on how to outmaneuver him." Tyrion tried not to show his relief. He spread his hands. "It seems I stand accused of being cunning. I'll not deny it. But yes, I can advise you on my father's tactics. I've studied them all my life. And if it spares my neck, I'll gladly help prevent a war, though I suspect war is already upon us." Robert's face darkened. "Tywin is sure to react with force once he hears. But maybe if we move quickly, we can hold the advantage. Ned says we'll need to rally the other great houses to our side. Arryn, Tully, Baratheon of Storm's End, the Dornish if we can. The Tyrells as well, though they're as slippery as eels." Tyrion nodded. "Indeed, my lord. Swift diplomacy might forestall Tywin from rallying the West too strongly. He's a brilliant commander and a ruthless man. If he sees the entire realm poised against him, he might hesitate to march. Or he might march anyway. Either way, you'll need to be prepared for a protracted conflict." Ned spoke quietly. "We must also name an heir, your grace. We cannot have a crisis of succession, not now. If Joffrey is disinherited, the line of succession passes to Stannis, your elder brother, or to Renly, but the realm will need clarity." Robert scowled. "Stannis is so damn stiff. He'll punish the entire city for the Queen's sin if we let him. Renly at least knows how to charm the lords. But there is precedent, after all. The crown should pass to Stannis. I can't just rewrite the laws because I dislike him. Unless I name him traitor or some nonsense. Seven hells, my head hurts." He reached for more wine, but Ned gently placed a hand on the pitcher. "Your grace, enough. You need a clear mind. We have much to do." Robert glowered, but withdrew his hand. He looked to Tyrion. "Very well, imp. We'll keep you around for counsel. But don't think I won't crush you if you step out of line." Tyrion offered a thin smile. "I live to serve the realm." And so this uneasy alliance was forged. Tyrion, who had exposed the bastardy of Joffrey, now found himself pressed into service by the king he had technically aided, and by Ned Stark, who had long viewed the Lannisters with distrust. The city was locked down. Cersei and Jaime languished in captivity, though each had their loyalists who chafed at the king's orders. News had yet to spread across Westeros, but that would change soon enough. Ravens would fly, rumors would travel, and once Tywin learned that both his son and daughter were taken, that his grandchildren were labeled royal bastards, he would not remain idle. Across the city, in the Tower of the Hand, Cersei stood by the window of her makeshift prison, looking out over the black waters of the Blackwater Rush. 2 guards were stationed at her door, and more patrolled the hall. She had tried to question them, to threaten them, even to cajole them, but they had their orders from the Hand himself. Ned Stark was no fool, and Robert was a wounded bear, unpredictable. She wore a thin dressing gown now, all the finery stripped away. Her golden hair was loose about her shoulders, but she was not the regal queen in that moment. She was a prisoner, a mother separated from her children. She had glimpsed Joffrey through a window earlier, surrounded by watchful guards who escorted him to a different chamber. That stung her more than the humiliation. Her mind churned with thoughts of escape, of vengeance. She knew Jaime had been taken. That was the worst blow of all, her love, her rock, now a captive. If he were free, they might have fled the city or struck at Robert together. But now, alone, she had to rely on cunning. She could only pray that Tywin would come with an army. Once the old lion arrived, the city would tremble, even with Robert and Ned at the helm. But would her father risk open rebellion against the crown if the crown was united with the other great houses? Perhaps. Tywin had never shied from war if it served his ends. But he was also pragmatic. The question was whether he saw more profit in negotiation or battle. Cersei bit her lip until she tasted blood, ignoring the pain. She knew one thing above all. She would not let them take her children from her. If it meant burning the city, so be it. She had told Ned Stark once that when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. She intended to win. She had played a bold game, but Tyrion had outmaneuvered her by going directly to Robert. She cursed her younger brother's name, vowing that if she ever emerged victorious, she would see Tyrion tortured for days. In the Red Keep's lower tower, Jaime Lannister sat in a cell that was more comfortable than the black cells, but a cell all the same. He replayed in his mind how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. If only he had learned of Tyrion's plan, or Ned Stark's suspicions, or even Jon Arryn's digging earlier. Perhaps he could have spirited Cersei and the children away. Perhaps he could have confronted Robert and ended him in a quick stroke. Instead, he was caged. The frustration gnawed at him like a rat in his gut. He gazed at the barred window, the squares of moonlight cast on the stone floor. His sword hand twitched. He was not a man built for captivity. He had spent his life as one of the most talented warriors in the realm, serving in the Kingsguard, certain of his place. Now that place was in shambles. He wondered if there was a chance for trial by combat, though for treason that was uncertain. Even if there was, would Robert name a champion that Jaime could defeat? Barristan Selmy, perhaps. A formidable foe indeed. That might be an even match. The Kingslayer versus the Bold. Jaime almost smiled at the thought. At least it would be better than rotting in a cell. Still, he could not make a plan until he knew more of what was happening beyond these walls. He was at the mercy of Robert and Ned and, ironically, Tyrion. Perhaps Tyrion, that cunning imp, could be convinced to help. Despite everything, Jaime loved his brother. Tyrion alone in the family had shown him acceptance, or at least had not recoiled from him like a freak. Maybe Tyrion could be swayed. Then again, if Tyrion had indeed orchestrated this, perhaps that love was now overshadowed by betrayal. The days that followed were tense. Robert and Ned took steps to secure the capital, summoning the lords of the realm to King's Landing for an urgent council. Some would come, some would not. Renly proved a staunch ally, advocating for decisive action. Stannis was not yet in King's Landing, but word was sent to Dragonstone, summoning him. Tyrion, for his part, remained on precarious ground, serving as an advisor yet also watched carefully by Ned's men. In private, Ned told Tyrion that if war could be avoided, he would do so, but if it came, House Stark would join House Baratheon against Tywin Lannister and all who stood with him. Beyond the city, at the crossroads, travelers and merchants began to whisper of trouble brewing. Those with sense hurried their business, left the capital if they could, or prepared for a siege. The roads to Casterly Rock were closely watched, and any raven flying west might carry tidings of the king's new stance. The lords of the Reach and the Stormlands, not to mention the Riverlands, weighed whether to heed the king's call or fear Tywin's vengeance. Meanwhile, in the north, Catelyn Stark would soon learn of the chaos and wonder if her husband was in mortal danger. She would undoubtedly want to bring her daughters home if possible, but the time for such an easy solution had passed. Sansa and Arya were, for the moment, safer in the Red Keep under Ned's watchful eye than on the open roads. Thus the realm stood on the brink of war, balanced precariously between the fury of House Lannister and the might of the Iron Throne. Men sharpened swords, forged alliances, plotted betrayals. And at the heart of it all, Tyrion Lannister found himself in the strangest position he could have imagined. A Lannister siding with the Baratheon king against his own sister and brother. He had always known that knowledge was power, and secrets could rule the Game of Thrones. But never had he seen so starkly how a single secret, Joffrey's bastardy, could rend the entire kingdom asunder. He thought often of the day he stood before Robert in that solar, risking his life on the chance that the king would see reason. He wondered if he had done the right thing or if he had damned them all to a blood-soaked future. Yet there was no going back now. The pieces were in motion, and war or peace would hinge on the choices of men far larger than the imp. Still, if there was one thing Tyrion understood, it was that the smallest man can cast a very large shadow. He would continue to maneuver, to speak truths that others feared to utter, to protect his own life and perhaps even spare the realm a darker fate. Only time would tell if that was enough to avert the doom that hovered over the Seven Kingdoms like a black storm. As the sun sank below the walls of King's Landing that night, bathing the city in red gold light, Tyrion stood on a rampart overlooking the shimmering waters of Blackwater Bay. The wind ruffled his hair, and he sipped from a cup of good arbor wine, though it barely eased his nerves. He heard the faint clang of distant forges, the stirring of armies being readied, the fearful hush that settled over the common folk. A single choice, his choice, had changed the course of kingdoms. He closed his eyes and murmured to himself, "I'm sorry, my sweet sister, but the game was bigger than the both of us." He drained the cup, tossed the dregs into the wind, and listened to them spatter against the stones below. Then he turned and walked back into the Red Keep, determined to survive whatever came next.